Hey guys, welcome to another video of the Random Watch Dude. Thanks for joining me on this. I'm going to record a quick video, and this video is going to be the fastest comparison you'll watch on YouTube of Omega and Rolex, because I know that's a conversation which is had frequently. I'm going to do a very quick video on which of those two brands I think is the best watch brand and makes the best watches. So bear with me on this, because I'm going to score these guys out of 10 for a list of 6 different facets, if you like, of watchmaking. I'm going to start with quality and quality control. I'm going to go to fit and finish. I'm going to go to specifications, variety, and that's choice of different models, price, and finally practicality. So bear with me on this, and just for you guys that are really into Grand Seiko and IWC, I'm sorry guys, but when we're comparing watch brands to Rolex, because of course Rolex is the gold standard when it comes to mid-tier luxury watches. Rolex is the gold standard, and the only other watch manufacturer, in my view, that gets close to them is Omega, and that's why I'm doing this comparison. So just to put that one to bed, that's why I'm not comparing them to IWC and all those guys, because they're not good enough, guys. I'm sorry. So I'm going to start with quality and quality control. Omega, for me, have fantastic quality control, but I don't think their quality is as good as Rolex. I think the quality of Rolex's product is absolutely second to none. I've never heard anybody have a single complaint about Rolex's quality. Forgive me, because I'm sure they're out there, but I don't see it. I've owned a couple of Omegas where I felt that the end links, and when I talk about quality, I'm talking about, you know, tolerances, fine tolerances on the machining. For example, not just the movement, but the actual bracelet and the case and the fit. I've had issues with Omega with the end links. They're just a little bit rattly. And I actually bought this up once with an Omega in the Omega boutique, and I said, my end links on my 2 previous Seamasters that I've had have been a bit rattly, and they've said, yeah, well, that's just normal. That's just the tolerance that they're machined to. So for me, Omega still make a fantastic watch, by the way. Still their quality and their quality control is excellent. It's not as good as Rolex. So if this is a boxing match and it's close, you'd score it 10-9, and I'm scoring this 10-9 to Rolex. Fit and finish. So fit and finish, what I mean by that is it kind of relates to the design, I guess, the thickness of the cases, the tapering of the lugs, the smoothness, the comfort on the wrist. And today, by the way, I'm wearing a Tudor, just to be just to be completely and utterly neutral. I thought I'd slap a Tudor on. Although maybe actually it's not neutral to wear a Tudor when you're evaluating Omega against Rolex, because of course Tudor is the pallbearer, you know, to Rolex's Undertaker, of course. But fit and finish, look, I'm going to score this another 10-9 to Rolex. I think the problem Omega have is that they're a little bit chunky on the case nowadays. I think their movements are too thick, and although their movements are fantastic, I think they're too thick, and therefore the cases have had to get thicker to compensate, or to I guess to basically just to accept the thickness of the movement in the case. And I think that's cost Omega in terms of comfort, because it tends to make the watches quite top heavy. So I'm scoring this 10-9 to Rolex. And don't worry guys, it doesn't carry on this way. This is not necessarily Rolex winning every single factor here. So the next factor is specifications. Now when we look specifically at the movements, I don't think many people are going to argue with me if I score this to Omega, and I'm scoring this 10-9 to Omega. Rolex, in terms of their specifications, they have a very, very limited range of movements, but they make those movements really, really well. They make a very, very solid and reliable product to Rolex. There's absolutely no argument with that. They probably make a more solid and more reliable product than Omega, but if I was to actually rate the innovation, for example, and you know, to a degree, the variety of specifications that you get offered by Omega, I think it's fair to say that Omega's variety of specifications that they offer, and let's take, for example, you know, obviously they've had the coaxial movement for a number of years now, that's not new, but you know, the anti-magnetism, you know, that they've gone to, is it 40,000 Gauss and counting. You know, I'm sure they're still working on increasing that. You know, they went METAS certified very early on, and they've done it very well, I might add. They're very accurate, the Omega movements. I'm scoring this 10.9 because I think Omega are working harder on offering a variety of different specifications, particularly with the movements. Now, in terms of the next category is variety in terms of the range, so the size of the range. I'm scoring this 10.9 to Omega again. I think Omega offer, in my view actually, I think Omega's range, their catalogue is almost too big. They've got too many watches in their catalogue, and they've probably, to be honest with you guys, maybe it's just that they've got too many watches I don't actually like in their catalogue. I haven't actually counted up all the different models and varieties that they make and compared that to Rolex, but I think it's fair to say that the variety that Rolex offer, I think it is lower than Omega, but I think the variety they offer, more of that is a variety which is more attractive to more people. Some of the watches that Omega make in their catalogue are a bit gaudy and a bit ugly. And I also think that maybe, you know, Omega have gone too far slightly down the special editions, like the summer blue edition they released recently, for example, and that was pretty much, you know, their big hitting marquee announcement for last year, wasn't it? You know, was the summer blue collection, which I think is a little bit gaudy. Don't like it. However, if I were to score Omega against Rolex just purely for the variety that they offer, they win it for me. They win it again. It's a boxing match. 10.9. So price, okay, so price is an interesting one. Now I've scored price on this 8 each. I don't think either of them have done themselves any favours in the last 2 or 3 years with their price increases. I think it's hurting Omega a lot more than it's hurting Rolex, because obviously the second-hand value of Rolex is higher anyway. Whereas the second-hand value of Omega has always been under retail. So when Omega have kept on whacking on these additional price increases, all they've done is they've extended the, I guess, the loss that the customer makes when they buy the watch. And I don't think they've really paid a lot of attention to that fact, is that every time Omega put their price up, the customer that's buying that watch is losing more money when they buy it. Now, you could argue that, hey, you shouldn't be buying a watch with any kind of concept or view on what it's worth if you wanted to sell it again, but the reality is that's what people do. You do that when you buy a car, and you definitely don't buy a house thinking, well, it's a lovely house and I'm going to enjoy living here. I'll probably lose money when I come to sell it, but that's okay. You don't do that with houses. You accept with cars that you're probably going to lose money when you sell it, but you still want to know, don't you? You still look at the second-hand market and say, right, this brand new C-Class Mercedes, which I'm about to buy, I'm going to get absolutely skinned alive when I try and sell it in 4 years' time. And you either decide to go with that or you don't. So it's the same with watches. Even if you're buying a watch with the intention of keeping it, you're still going to check out the used market. So I don't think Omega have helped themselves. The only reason I've scored this 8 each is because I think that both of them have gone to the excess now in terms of the price. I think they've pushed the price increases too hard. And I don't think either of them are helping themselves. You know, if they're looking to make friends, not enemies, in the watch market, especially amongst watch enthusiasts, I don't think either of them have helped themselves over certainly the last 12 months, especially as the world economy has started to drop. They've both decided to hit the price increase button even harder. So I'm not quite sure what they're smoking there, but yeah, well, time will tell. Time will tell, as it always does. So finally, guys, I'm going to talk about practicality. Now, this is how does the watch actually work for you on your wrist in the real world. Forget the investment side of things, forget the specs, forget everything in terms of, you know, the aura and the specs and the general kind of perception in the marketplace of these watch brands and the watches they make. How practical are these watches actually to wear? Now, I've scored this one 10.9 to Rolex. And the real reason, to be honest with you, I've scored this 10.9 to Rolex is because I think Rolex just make a slimmer, more comfortable, more balanced watch on the wrist, which makes it ever so practical to wear. Some people would argue with me that Rolex is the most stolen watch on the planet. It's the watch that gets most people beaten up on a Friday night. I totally understand that. I get that, but I'm not scoring it on on whether you're likely to get it stolen off your wrist. I'm scoring it on how comfortable and practical is it to wear. I'm going to go back to with Omega. The reason Omega, again, 9 out of 10 is still fantastic for Omega. They're just not quite up there with Rolex, and I think it's because Omegas are quite chunky on the wrist. I think some of their dials are a bit large in terms of the diameter. The Aquaterra is a good example of that, by the way. The Aquaterra is a big watch. I tried one on a couple of months ago, and you know, the dimensions, for me, I think Aquaterras actually wear larger than you'd think. You know, the dimensions of that Aquaterra, I think it was a 41mm, and it wore big. It felt like a bit of a frying pan, if I'm honest with you, on the wrist. So I think Omega have a lot of work to do there on their kind of their fit and their practicality for everyday wear. And I think Rolex have actually got it to a T, absolutely perfect. So I'm scoring that 10-9 to Rolex. Now guys, unless you've been keeping count of this whilst we've been going along, I'm going to tell you what the scores are. So the scores out of 60 for Omega, and this is a really good score for Omega. Bearing in mind they were either a 9 or a 10 on all of these because they make a fantastic watch. The Omega has scored 55 out of 60. Very good. And the Rolex, guys, has pipped Omega by 1 point. They score 56 out of 60. Now, you might argue with me, oh, well, you engineered that. Well, no, I didn't actually, because I didn't really keep a tally of these scores until I got to the end. The only argument I think you may have with me on this score, because I've scored Rolex 1 point ahead of Omega, the only argument you might have with me is on the price, where I scored them both at 8 each. You know, some of you might argue that actually Omega should have scored higher than Rolex because they're a cheaper brand. They're nearly as good. They're not as good, but they're nearly as good. Therefore, you know, particularly because they're generally about 25 to 30% cheaper at retail, and you can get a discount on top of that. So you might actually get 40% less than the equivalent Rolex. You may have said, well, let's score Omega at a higher score for price. But my train of thought on this, guys, was it's not about. I wasn't actually necessarily talking about the value. I was talking about what you're actually getting from the brand for your money. And I do think that both of them 3 or 4 years ago were pretty much bang on with their sell price for what you got. But I don't think either of them are there anymore. So apologies for that. So yeah, 55 out of 60 for Omega. 56 out of 60 for Rolex. That's my verdict, guys. That's how I see it. But at the end of the day, Rolex pips this by a point, and the reality is that Omega still make a fantastic watch. It's just not quite as fantastic as the watch that Rolex makes. And I am a fanboy of both. I own both. I own Omegas, I own Rolex. I'm a fanboy of both, as you'll see from my previous videos. So I'd like to think that this is a fairly unbiased review of those two watch brands. And if you want my advice on which to pick out of those two, my suggestion is, if I were you looking at owning either a Rolex or an Omega, I'd say plan to own both. Because, and I mean that genuinely, is plan to own both. Whether you buy your Omega first or whether you buy your Rolex first, always have it in your mind that you're going to get the other one quite soon, because I actually genuinely believe that owning both of those brands has got you 100% covered. You're totally devoid and free of criticism if you own both a Rolex and an Omega, because you can call yourself a fanboy of both, and you can appreciate both because they are very, very different watches. They have different styles and different ethos, and they're good at different things. So owning both for me is the utopia. So good luck with that, guys. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Cheers.